Hi, it's Ramsey Dewey at the JX Fight Club in Shanghai, China. Today, get ready for another edition of Q&A with Coach. Got a bunch of relatively short questions. First one comes from our friend Broken Radio again, who has a short one. Says, on an irrelevant note. No questions are irrelevant, my friend. But our friend says, what kind of music do you like? Artists and genres and that kind of thing. Okay, there's a lot of music I like, but I've got to be honest, I don't listen to music very often. And kind of a weird situation, I just didn't grow up with it. I grew up in a small town. You ever seen that movie Footloose, where dancing was forbidden? My hometown was kind of like that. Instead of dancing, though, it was music. It was anything with a beat, anything with electric guitars. Rock and roll was the devil, according to everybody. And so I just didn't really grow up around it. And so when I left home and I had the option to listen to music anytime I wanted to, I was just never really in the habit. But I do like a number of types of music when I do hear it. I love blues. I love Stevie Ray Vaughan. I think he's awesome. He's one of the best ever. I love Eddie Van Halen. The band Van Halen, no, I don't love every one of their songs. Like Jump, it's one of the more popular songs. I don't enjoy that song, probably because it's the one Van Halen song that doesn't have any awesome guitar or drum solos. So, I love Joaquin Rodrigo. He was a blind classical guitarist from Spain who composed operas and flamenco and all kinds of different stuff. Super talented guy, very, very inspiring story. Wrote things like El Concierto de Aranjuez. Check that out. You can probably look it up here on YouTube. Great music. I like Metallica. I love the Master of Puppets album. I love neoclassical guitar. Like Steve Vai, absolutely amazing musician. I love jazz. You know, old school jazz. Nah, not so much the new stuff. I really can't name any new modern contemporary jazz composers, but you know, the old standards. Love that stuff. I like folk music. I used to play in a band back in college. We played what I described as folk rock, funk, fusion sort of thing. Basically, we wrote songs based on what we felt at the time and the instruments that we had. So, anyway, music is relevant to fighting. It really is, because I've noticed when people train with music, it changes their rhythm. It changes the way that they move. And sometimes if people are really, really used to training with music in the background, if they never train without, if they never spar without it or whatever, they're going to find themselves at a loss when they don't have that anymore. But it can be a powerful force to push you forward, to pick you up when you're feeling down, to get you moving when you don't want to. And yeah, music. One of the great mysteries of life, what that does to us and why. Anyway, interesting question. Next question. Our friend ZEI asks, what do you think of the Boyka movies and how they represent cage fighting as a whole? I personally love and admire actors like Scott Adkins and Michael Jai White, which inspired me to get into MMA in the first place. Okay, now I haven't seen all of those movies. I've seen little clips of the fight scenes, and they're really cool fight scenes. They're pretty over-the-top fight scenes. So, does real MMA look like that? Usually no. But how does it represent MMA as a whole? Well, I would say for your generation, probably the same way that actors like Bruce Lee and Chuck Norris and Jean-Claude Van Damme represented mixed martial arts, which didn't even exist back then for my generation. They inspired us. They inspired us to get up and move and learn martial arts and which eventually led us to this awesome thing that is cage fighting. So even though what we see in the movies is dramatically different than what actually goes on in the cage, I mean, we're probably not going to do triple spinning flying helicopter kicks and stuff like that. But if that stuff inspires you to take a step in the right direction, then more power to you. Next question. Our friend Eclectic Journeys asks, can you comment on how good mediocre UFC fighters are compared to the average person? Is it comparable to the difference between someone who barely gets into the NBA and someone who was a decent high school basketball player. I would say it's a way bigger difference than that. We're talking about somebody who, just barely got into the NBA versus somebody who doesn't even know what basketball is. Okay, the average person doesn't know how to fight. The average person has some terrible instincts for fighting. The average, entry-level UFC fighter is a jiu-jitsu black belt, collegiate wrestler, halfway decent boxer, professional level kickboxer. And, even at the entry level, with some notable recent exceptions like CM Punk and those other freak show fights, who got in based on fame, the average entry-level UFC fighter is a good fighter. A highly trained fighter like that is like a Jedi compared to a normal person. Yeah, that's a Star Wars reference. Those space wizards from Star Wars who can do mind tricks and fight with lightsabers and use magic force powers and stuff. Anyway, that's what it feels like for a normal person to attempt to fight somebody who actually knows how to fight for real. Seriously, it's like a Jedi space wizard by comparison. So that's a pretty extreme difference. Next question. Our next question comes from our friend Sanjeev, who says, please make a video on recovering from adrenal fatigue. Now, before I read this question, I had never heard of adrenal fatigue, so I went to the internet to look it up and figure out what this thing is. And the most accurate information I could find calls it pseudoscience. That basically means it's not real science. It's not based on empirical evidence. There's no empirical evidence showing that this is a real thing. Now, there are people saying that they suffer from a condition called adrenal fatigue. Now, I'm just going to read a section of the Wikipedia article on that in case you've never heard of this thing like I did. It says adrenal fatigue or hypoadrenia is a pseudoscientific diagnosis believed in alternative medicine to be the state when adrenal glands are exhausted and unable to produce adequate quantities of hormones, primarily the glucocorticoid cortisol, or however you pronounce that, due to chronic stress or infections. The term was invented in 1998. Excuse me. Got a little bit of a cough going on. Maybe I'm suffering from adrenal fatigue. Anyway, it was invented in 1998 by James Wilson, who was a chiropractor, which is also a pseudo-scientific belief. Sorry if you believe in chiropractorism. I don't even know what the practice of being a chiropractor is called. But I'm going to tell you something about chiropractors. Many years ago, I got into a car wreck. I was inside the car. I was stopped at the stoplight waiting for my turn to go, and the guy behind me didn't stop, and he plowed right into us going full speed, and boom, totaled both cars, and it did a number on my neck and back and displaced some vertebrae and some wonderful things like that. And my insurance covered treatment at a chiropractor, and somebody said, hey, you should go, this guy knows what he's doing, he's really good. So I went there, and the guy popped my back, and every time I went it felt pretty good, and I went there for a few months, and he popped the back and recommended some exercises and some physical therapy and things like that, and it seemed to help. But after a while the pain would always come back, and then after a few months the chiropractor pulled me aside, and he said, hey, your insurance coverage is about to run out, so I'm going to explain your options. You could keep coming to me for treatment and pay me to keep popping your back and make it feel better for a little while, but I gotta be honest, this is treating the symptom, it is not the cure. And that kind of shocked me, because I'd never ever met a chiropractor that honest before. Because yes, popping the back feels wonderful, feels awesome. And you know what? I'm gonna show you a way that you can save a whole bunch of money on chiropractors in case you're into that sort of thing. Hold on. Here we go. What are these? Foam rollers. Lie on one of these things, roll it up and down your back until you feel snap, crackle, pop. And there you go. Pop your own back all kinds of different ways with those. You can get one of these in China for like 30 kwai. I think that's like, what is that in US dollars? Just a couple of dollars, actually. You can get one in the US fairly inexpensive on like Amazon or go to Walmart or whatever if you live there. So it's not an expensive piece of equipment. So if you like that feeling of your back being popped, there you go. Now all that really is displacement of air or displacement of a joint. It doesn't actually reset the joint if it is displaced, but it might make you feel better. So if it makes you feel better, if it gives you the result you want, then sure, that's the right way. I often say that. But I digress back to adrenal fatigue. So if you're complaining about adrenal fatigue, obviously you're experiencing some type of fatigue that is real, and however you want to diagnose that or whatever you want to call it, I'm not going to say it's not a real thing affecting you, because if you feel bad, you feel bad. So again, I don't really understand what adrenal fatigue is supposed to be or how it's supposed to make you feel. But if you feel fatigued, if you feel bad, if you feel like you're just not in the right place physically, how do you address that? Well, a few simple things that I always recommend: how you move, how you eat, how you sleep, how you breathe, and how you think. Those 5 things are going to dramatically change almost everything physically about the way you look, the way you feel, and the way you can perform. So make sure how you eat is good, how you sleep is perfect, how you move is functional. You know, get up and move your body, move all your joints, move all your muscles. Get some exercise every single day without exception. Stretch those muscles, exercise, flex those muscles, all that good stuff. Man, got something in my throat here. Anyway, so above all else, keep a positive attitude. There was a short story I read a long time ago. I don't remember what it was called. I think maybe Mark Twain wrote it. Maybe it was Edgar Allan Poe. I don't remember. One of those old-timey American writers around that era, about this guy who believed that he was dying, and there was really nothing wrong with him, but he believed he was dying, so at the end of the day, he actually died. Which is kind of how the disease rabies works. I intended this to be a very short answer, but I'm going to go off on a bit of a tangent. Rabies kills. Rabies is incurable with the exception of one case. If you do not receive a rabies vaccine within 24 hours, it is basically incurable. What the virus actually does, it doesn't attack the body, it attacks the brain. And the weird thing about the brain, if the brain believes, if your mind believes that you are dying, guess what? You're dead. And so, rabies comes to the brain and it tells you you are dying. And so as a result, the body follows suit and it dies. Weird, right? So, rabies is one of those things we can't help because it's an actual virus attacking you. But you know what? You have a choice in the matter over what you do with your mind. So, keep a positive outlook with your mind. That, my friend, that you have a choice over. So I hope you get this sorted out. I hope you can figure out what this is and why you're feeling bad or fatigued. If you have a more specific question about that, please leave it in the comments down below. Or if you have more information or a link to something you want me to take a look at, go ahead. Next question. Our next question comes from Scientific Methodizer, who says, Thanos in the UFC, what do you think? So, Thanos, the antagonist from Avengers Infinity War, a Marvel Comics character, one of the most powerful entities in the Marvel Universe, and the most powerful right now in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Big spoiler alert for that movie if you haven't seen it, and that movie got spoiled for me. I'm going to tell you what, I was watching a YouTube video a while back, and it was a video about Avengers, and in the title it said no spoilers. Then all of a sudden, boom, they flash a scene from the movie where, spoiler alert, spoiler alert, spoiler alert, everybody dies and the bad guy wins. And I was like, what? You spoiled the movie? And the guy was like, well, you shouldn't be on the internet if you don't want it to be spoiled. I was like, oh, how can you do this? These movies don't come out until like 3 months later in the People's Republic of China. Boo, hiss. Anyway, so major spoiler alert, everybody dies. Well, not everybody, but like Thanos wins. The bad guy wins at the end of the movie. He beats everybody because he's very powerful. So a guy who could literally snap his fingers and make half the sentient beings in the universe disappear, fighting in the UFC, a guy who can punch the Hulk half to death with his bare hands in the UFC, how would he do? A guy who can single-handedly in hand-to-hand combat beat the entirety of the Avengers. Yeah, I think that's pretty obvious. Then again, he would probably be disqualified for performance enhancers. I mean, because man, if you tested that guy, I mean, if you took a sample of that alien blood, you would find all kinds of crazy substances in there that are not present in humans. And scientists would be scratching their heads like, nope, we can't let this guy compete in the UFC. He's not even human. It's the Ultimate Fighting Championship. Wait, there's actually nothing about humans specified in that title. So, who knows? What if a broadcast of the UFC made it to another planet, like out there, Alpha Centauri or whatever, and the Alpha Centaurians are like actual centaurs or something like that, and then they come over to Earth and they're like, hey, we want to fight in the Ultimate Fighting Championship. And we're like, yeah, half horse, half human hybrids, we don't know about that. And then they'd point to our ancient Greek statues of like centaurs heel hooking people. Let me see if I can get one of those up on the screen. Check this out, seriously. Centaurs, heel hooking people in ancient Greek mythology. These dudes knew how to grapple. Anyway, I'm going way off topic. Our next question comes from EDC Dane, who says, hi Ramsey, I'm a 45-year-old former amateur boxer. I've started kickboxing and BJJ a couple of months ago. I've just started sparring with the kickboxing team and I'm doing okay, despite my horrible kicks and my old age. Dude, you're not that old. I mean, I'm 40. 45 is older, I'll give you that, but you're not 1 foot in the grave yet, my friend. But I get it. You know, I always train with people like half my age and you know, people with these tremendous physical advantages, or so they think. Never underestimate old man strength, my friend. Old man strength, it's a real thing. Anyway, back to the question. But I'm experiencing that the young fighters are getting frustrated. Okay, I see this sometimes too. Seriously, people half my age, they spar with me, and they think, oh, this guy's like 40, he's old. And then they end up tapping out 500 times or getting tagged on the chin a whole bunch, and they're like, what's going on there? Not to brag, but experience is kind of a big deal. If you are able-bodied and you have decades of experience that your training partner does not have, they're going to get frustrated. So back to the question. The young fighters are getting frustrated, and they turn up the intensity trying to win. And that's an issue. If you try to win in sparring, you're doing it the wrong way. Sparring is about trying to learn, trying to push each other to get better, not necessarily trying to win, unless you are specifically training for a fight and your coach puts you in the ring with a sparring partner for that specific reason to try to win that sparring match. Okay? That would be the only exception. On a couple of occasions, he says, I've had to make examples. I don't like it. They get angry and try to knock me out. I've tried to talk to them, but they say, no problem, and the next time they don't want to spar. What to do? Okay. Well, if they don't want to spar, they don't want to spar. And, I mean, there's not much we can do about that. I mean, we can try to coax them like, hey, I'll go easy on you this time. But again, if they have the wrong attitude about sparring and they're trying to win anyway, and you go easy on them, they'll just keep ramping it up until you have to put them in their place again. So, I think the main thing that works for me is just be the best guy in the room. Do everything you can, train every single day, you know, lift weights, hit the bags, do your sparring, do your rolling, do it religiously so that you can quite literally be the best guy in the room. So when people throw punches at you, you're slipping them. When people throw punches at you, you're blocking them, you're parrying, you're countering. When people are trying to break your arms and choke you, you're 3 steps ahead of them already, and they're scratching their heads like, where'd he go? Oh, he's behind me. Being strangled. And that's the easiest way to do this, but I'm going to tell you something I think about quite often. is what happens when my age catches up with me. People ask me this a lot. What happens when your age catches up with you? And I've told this story a number of times about this old Tai Chi master that I met in Jiangsu province here in the People's Republic of China. And he was 80 years old, and he was really good at fighting. He was a master of Tai Chi Chuan and a master of praying mantis style Kung Fu. And I sparred with him, and he used all these Tai Chi techniques, joint locks and throws and sweeps and all kinds of cool stuff that I'd never even seen or experienced before, to toss me on my back and threaten to break my arms and all this amazing stuff. And the guy was 80 years old, and he was just really, really efficient at moving. And it was mind-boggling to me. And I'm going to partially answer somebody else's question about this old guy they asked in one of these videos, which is basically, do you think it was magic? No, it was experience. It was so many decades of experience, 80 years of experience in a body that was still functional and fit. I mean, this guy was super flexible. He could do the splits and hold his leg up over his head. He could do backflips and round-offs and gymnastics movements at the age of 80. Why? Because he abided by the laws of health. Remember those 5 things I mentioned before? The way you eat, the way you move, the way you sleep, the way you breathe, and the way you think. Make sure each one of those is positive. And as a result, it's not going to guarantee that when you're 80, you're going to be a Kung Fu master, but it will guarantee that when you're 80, you will be in significantly better shape than you would otherwise. So, do everything you can to make sure that this vessel is going to last you for the duration. I mean, we're all going to die and all that. Nothing you do will make you immortal. Nothing you do is going to stop the body from eventually degrading and aging and all of those things. But the way we abide by those 5 principles, especially in combat sports, as we age, can allow us to move much more efficiently. If I had a fight with a younger version of myself, a version of me in my 20s or in my 30s, a version of me from when I was fighting professionally, who would win that fight? Me, right now, the older one. The guy who's 40. Why this guy? This guy has more injuries. This guy has achy joints. This guy's got, I creak. These joints creak when I move, and I wake up in the morning, and I gotta warm them up quite a bit more than I used to. But I'll tell you why this guy would win, why the older me would win. Why? Because I'm smarter, and I'm more experienced, and I'm much, much more efficient. So even though I don't have the speed of my youth, I've got the wisdom of my age. And that makes a huge difference, my friend. So, well, if you have to put the young folks in their place, put them in their place, but maybe explain to them beforehand and say, hey, we're going to spar. If you try to sleep me, man, I will put you in your place. Do you understand? Maybe they'll take that as a challenge and try to knock you out anyway. But let them know beforehand that you are dead serious. You are not there to get brain damage. You're a 45-year-old man, sparring and learning martial arts for your own personal benefit. And it's not a fight to the death. But if he tries to make it one, woe betide him. What else can you do, though? What else can you do? I mean, there's got to be a better option than that, right? I'm sure some of you are typing some furious comments down below. No, do this instead. Do that instead. Man, I've got some good friends in their 50s who are still sparring and competing, not fighting professionally in mixed martial arts or boxing, but competing in jiu-jitsu and sports like that, or still sparring in the gym, putting on the gloves and sparring guys like half their age in the gym. And most of the younger guys that I see really respect their age. They're like, this guy's 50, I'm not going to attempt to tear his head off. I'm going to make this as technical of a match as I can so we can both get the most out of this. And maybe you can just try to explain that to these younger guys. Hey, I'm twice your age. I have all of this boxing experience. I know how to knock people out. I don't want to do that. Let's be as technical as we can so that we can get the most out of this. I hope that helps. Thanks for watching. Get out there and train. Our friend Jabura82 says, Ramsey, do you care about the Conor versus Khabib matchup as a technical matchup? Two very different skill sets from two fighters on the top of their respective games, in my opinion. Your thoughts? Doesn't need to be a who will win, but a side-by-side analysis would be something I'm sure many people would enjoy hearing. And yeah, I'm looking forward to this match. I think it's going to be cool to watch. You know, we've got Conor McGregor, who's this super explosive, deadly, kill him with one punch type of striker, and Khabib, who is pretty much the same thing, but in grappler form. So, it's the striker versus grappler paradigm we have here. And a lot of people are super excited about this, but I think a lot of people are also going to be either really disappointed or really super happy about the end result. Because it's a very predictable fight, in my opinion. Not who would win. I mean, I don't know which one is going to win, but this is what will happen if Conor wins, and this is what will happen if Khabib wins. If Conor wins, he catches Khabib on a mistake and knocks him out, starches him. And people are going to go, woo, we knocked him out, yay. And, okay. And it won't be, a super long technical fight or anything like that. If Khabib wins, he's going to get that takedown, he's going to control Conor, he's going to squish him on the floor, he's going to beat him up there, and that's going to be that. And there won't be much Conor can do from that position. Now, it is possible one of these guys could surprise us. Maybe Khabib's going to throw some crazy out-of-nowhere strike that'll catch Conor, and it's going to shock and surprise the world. Maybe Conor McGregor is going to surprise us and do a power double leg and put Khabib on his back and slam him into obscurity, but probably not. Probably not. It's most likely going to be one or the other, and we're going to be like, oh, well, that's about what I expected. So technically, that's what I see happening. So it's a hugely anticipated match, but ultimately, I think if we have our expectations up in the clouds, it's going to disappoint us. Next question. Our next question comes from our friend Javed, who says, in the wake of the KSI Logan Paul boxing match, these two famous YouTubers who staged a boxing match with each other, would you ever train a YouTuber, like a famous YouTuber like that, who wanted to try an amateur MMA match? Okay. Yeah, I absolutely would. Anybody who wants to train in mixed martial arts, especially if their attitude is in the right place, yeah, I would train them. So if I had some famous YouTuber who wanted to come here, I mean, I've had some less famous YouTubers come here and train. But if I had a famous guy come here for preparing for a comparable match to that, but MMA instead of boxing, would I train him? Yeah, heck yes I would. I would train him to win that fight. And he would. I'm absolutely that confident in my abilities to train fighters. Yes, he would win that fight. Now I noticed something with that match. I watched a little bit of KSI's training, and I noticed he bounced around with a bunch of different celebrity trainers, if you will. He trained for a day with what's his name, Michael Venom Page. He trained with Forrest Griffin. He trained with a few UFC fighters. Just spent a few hours at the gym, and it made for an interesting YouTube video. But I don't know. I don't know if he really buckled down and worked out a solid game plan with one coach that he works with. I don't know. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't, but I didn't see that. That is what a fighter needs. So if a famous YouTuber came in and asked me for that, yes, that is what I would give them. That solid game plan, that base, that ability to win a fight and put on a show and represent their training and represent the sport of mixed martial arts in a positive way so as not to make it a freak show or a circus. Great question. Our next question comes from Martand Tia, who says, "Hey Ramsey, I have a question for you." Cool, that's what I'm here for. If you weren't a combat sports coach, which other job or profession would you have gone for? Did you have a dream job in mind when you were younger? And do you have any regrets for not going for something else? Oh man, I think I had lots of dream jobs when I was younger. I think the first thing I wanted to do when I was a kid was be an artist, because drawing came really easy to me. And after that, I think I wanted to be an astronaut. I wanted to be the first man on Mars for a long time, until I studied it, and I learned it would take like a year to get there, and I'd have to spend at least a year there to do anything, scientifically important, and then it would take a year to get back, and that's 3 years out of your life spent alone on a dusty, lifeless planet, and also floating out in space in a tiny little capsule. And the more I thought about that, I thought, well, that kind of sucks. I'm not really that interested in that sort of thing. I became more interested in the profession of teaching. I had a teacher in high school, a band teacher named Mr. Lee, and Mr. Lee was awesome, and he was super inspirational, and I didn't really know anything about music or play any instruments, but I really wanted to. I remember hearing the high school jazz band play some really cool jazz. They played Take the A Train. It's a great old classic song, and I was like, wow, I really like the sound of that. I want to do something like that. And so I signed up for band, and Mr. Lee said, what instrument do you play? And I said, none of them. What instruments do you have? And he was like, well, here, how about a bass clarinet? I was like, bass clarinet, all right, cool. So I picked up the bass clarinet they had at the school, and I taught myself how to play it. And my mom said I sounded like a dying cow when I attempted to learn how to play this thing. But eventually I figured it out and developed some aptitudes with it, learned to play that and the regular clarinet and saxophones and the trumpet and the flugelhorn and the French horn and all these other instruments. And it was a lot of fun. I was like, wow, I'm really good at music. I want to be a music teacher, just like my hero, Mr. Lee. And so when I went to college, I signed up to be a music major. And I took this music theory class. I was so excited to take it, and then I failed miserably, and I didn't understand anything about music theory, and I realized music theory is really hard. It's like math, but with music. Oh! And it's not all fun and games and learning to play instruments and make neat little sounds. There's a lot of work behind that profession I was not prepared for. So I failed out of the music program, and my college had pretty rigorous standards for acceptance in these various programs, so I had to switch majors. And while I was trying to figure out what to do, I kept taking Spanish classes because I spoke Spanish. I spent some time living in Argentina, and it just seemed like something to do to keep my Spanish up and whatnot. At one point I saw some dancers dance, and I had this kind of midlife crisis at age 21 and almost ended up dying multiple times. And I was like, man, I got to follow my dream. I want to dance. I want to be like that. I want to learn ballet and modern and all these other performing arts. And so I did. And what happened? Well, I dedicated myself to it way more than I ever did to music, because I remember the miserable failure of failing out of music theory, and man, that just ate at me right there, and I was like, never again, never again. So I auditioned for the dance program multiple times, actually, because I failed, and I was like, I will not accept failure this time. So I went at it again and again and again, until finally, competing with these people who had been dancing since a very young age, I was able to get into the program and then eventually dance professionally. But the thing is, unless you are really, really good and really well connected, you're not going to make a lot of money as a professional dancer. And I didn't. I made some, just not really enough to pay bills and buy food and keep the lights on and stay and not be homeless. So I ended up working a ton of menial manual labor type of jobs. I went back to school at a community college, looking to get a better profession, than working in a factory or doing routine maintenance on trucks and things like that. if you do that, more power to you. Those are tough jobs, and we need them. But it's not what I loved, and it's not what made me excited to wake up in the morning. And I thought, well, I've got an interest in training people, in physical fitness, and teaching. So put those together. I went to school again to get a degree in fitness technology, which is essentially the art of personal training and group fitness instruction. And so I dabbled with that for a while, and it all came back to martial arts eventually, because that is what I had been doing this whole time. It's like, man, the thing I have invested the most time in my life, the thing I do every single day, was martial arts. And I love teaching and I love martial arts, so why not put the two together? Because this is what excites me to wake up in the morning when it's still dark outside, and this is what motivates me to do those 5 things I keep telling you about. Make sure everything about the way you eat, move, sleep, breathe, and think is positive. That's what motivates me to do that. I mean, this is my why for physical fitness. This is my why for, getting up and making a paycheck. So, other things I considered. I mean, when I finished college, I remember thinking I really would have liked to have studied film or acting or something like that, because I love movies and I love filmmaking and I love video editing and all these cool things like that. But at the same time, it's an extremely competitive field, and very few people make it and all that. But it's the same thing with so many other things. I mean, fighting, how many people make it in the big show in fighting? Not too many. But fighting was almost like a backup plan in a way. It was this thing that I started doing professionally to earn an extra paycheck. I was already working 3 jobs when I started fighting professionally, and I started fighting to earn an extra paycheck, just to be able to pay bills, just to be able to pay basic medical bills. Great twist of irony right there, I know. But yeah, it's one of those things that life kind of pushed me toward, and I embraced it. So thanks for the question. Our next question comes from longtime subscriber Talent Dance TV, who says, a lot of times in martial arts films or games or storylines of these shows often go like this. They have a character who goes off alone out into the world, to the forests or the mountains, to train for an extended period of time. And they come back as a super deadly, powerful, or experienced fighter. And I wonder how true this could work in real life, as I often think, well, if they go out alone like that, who is there to spar with or practice their technique or adequately weight train or anything like that? I think it would be a good thing to do for short periods of time, but usually the person is gone for years in the mountains in these stories. Could this work in real life? Okay, I think you hit the nail on the head. If you were out by yourself, you are going to be extremely limited in what you can accomplish, especially if you don't already know how to fight. If you've never trained with another human before and then you go off by yourself, you're not going to know anything about fighting humans when you come down from that mountain. Now, if you're an experienced fighter and you go off on a pilgrimage up to a mountaintop and do a bunch of handstand push-ups and meditate or whatever, then come down, your head might be all cleared and you might think, well, that was a neat little retreat, now back to fighting, and maybe that experience can be positive and uplifting and push you in a forward direction. But yeah, if I go off for years and years by myself and never spar with another human, and then I get back on the mat with another human, I'm gonna get my butt kicked. You need to train with real live humans in order to get good at fighting real live humans. That's all there is to it. Excellent question. Keep them coming. We've got a question from our friend Aurelian, who tells his story. He was at an ATM, he was getting some money out, and there was a line of impatient people behind him, and the guy immediately behind him was starting to get really aggressive and make some really aggressive gestures. And he got out of there okay, but he put his hand out like, hey, back off, leave me alone. I don't want any trouble, that sort of thing, and ended up walking away. But Aurelian has a question. He basically says, so what if, what if this guy wanted to cause trouble? How do I walk away from that? What if he ran up behind me and stabbed me in the back? What if he was a crazy guy? What if he ran up and choked me from behind? How do I walk away with that? Well, good on you for not escalating it and turning it into something worse than it was. But that's a legitimate concern. How do we know if we're dealing with a crazy guy? Because this guy was getting really ramped up over next to nothing. And so probably the worst thing you could have done in that situation was ramp it up yourself and throw aggression right back at him, because then he would have upped it to 11, man. And then you would have had a fight on your hands for sure. But if you have a really aggressive guy like that, then yeah, removing yourself from the situation is probably the best thing you can do. But at the same time, how do you walk away from that with your eyes on the guy? Walk away, say, I don't want any trouble, get out of there. Keep your hands in a protective stance. Keep something in between you and that other guy. Like you said, he might have a knife. And make sure you know what he's doing. Make sure you know what you're doing. Make sure you're familiar with the space in between you and what's happening there. And remove yourself from the situation with your eyes on the threat. Even if you have to look over your shoulder. That's a tough situation. Man, I remember I was fighting. I had a fight at this nightclub. They used to do these kickboxing matches at these nightclubs over in Salt Lake City where I used to fight. And I had this fight. I ended up winning. And afterwards, this guy from the crowd, this drunk guy, comes up and started saying these really aggressive things and trying to start a fight with me. And this actually happened quite a bit. Because drunk people watching fights, they get these superhuman delusions of their abilities, and they think, oh, I just watched a fight, that means I can fight because I'm drunk. And so he starts to try to start a fight with me, and I'm just like, hey man, chill, it's okay. We're all here to have fun. I'm going to go over here, bye. But I kept my eyes on him. Because I didn't know if he was going to smash something over my head or whatever. I don't make it a habit to go to bars. I don't drink. The only time I ever went to a nightclub was to fight, to do these kickboxing and MMA shows over there. And that was just for a paycheck, man. So when I ran into guys like this, yeah, I walked away, put space in between them and me, kept my guard up, but at the same time in a fairly non-threatening stance. Fortunately, unlike other primates, like gorillas or chimpanzees or monkeys, to humans, this is a sign of submission. When you do this to a gorilla or a chimpanzee, this is a sign of aggression. Also, showing your teeth to other primates is a sign of aggression. So that is one of the most aggressive things you can do to an ape. But to humans, when we put our hands up, we're trained to think, oh, that's submission, like, oh, he's non-threatening. But at the same time, yeah, my hands are up here in a position where I can, block punches coming at me, or boom, give you a punch if needs be, hopefully not. But yeah, it's a defensive position. Not unlike a Muay Thai stance. Okay? But, yeah, keep something in between you and the other guy. Keep your eyes on him. Stay focused. Get out of there. Stay safe. Good luck to you, my friend. Next question. Our next question comes from Torg from Germany, who has this really interesting question. He is a table tennis player in Germany, and he explained the point system in table tennis, which I didn't know anything about, and I think it's really interesting and really cool. He says normally adults can range from 900 points, which is a total beginner, to 2,700 points, which would be the world's best player. He says he's currently at 1,350 points, which is somewhere in the middle. And under normal circumstances, somebody with 100 points less than his enemy does not stand a chance to win. That's really interesting. So basically, a 900-point player would not be able to beat a 1,000-point player, for example, under most circumstances. So there are basically 18 levels in our profession. where one has no chance against the next, which, by the way, kind of blew my mind when I first understood this, and that's actually blowing my mind when I understood this, when you explained that to me. He says, I can imagine that it is somewhat similar in every profession. So also in fighting, even though it might not be as obvious due to the lack of a probabilistic-based point system such as ours. Anyhow, I say this because from my experience, if you have as little as 1,100 points, you will not lose against any non-club player anymore. Even if those fancy hotshots that dominate the stone plates in your neighborhood, if you know what I mean. And 1,100 points really isn't that much. So his question, couldn't it be, by all justified critique of self-defense courses for women, that it might be enough to lift them up to the 1,100 point equivalent in fighting? Obviously, she would not stand a chance against most half-decent fighters, especially not you. Well, thanks for the vote of confidence. I'm not planning on going out there and attacking any women on the streets, but I get what you mean. But wouldn't it be enough for the average Joe that is not in a fight club and thus to be of huge value after all? Okay, so that's an interesting question. Now, let me flip this around and get out of the realm of self-defense for a minute. Now, we don't have a point system like that in fighting, in mixed martial arts, or boxing, or any combat sport that I know of. And that would be really interesting if there was. I mean, there are people who've tried to do this with rankings, fighter rankings. A lot of people jokingly call it math, M-M-A-T-H, MMA math. When you try to calculate who would win based on stats and whatnot. And math is a funny thing. You know, math with two M's, because it, man, if you buy into that, you'll often be disappointed quite a bit. So the thing with fighting that makes it very different is that anybody can beat anybody on any given day. However, in one way, it is very similar to table tennis. If you have a significantly more experienced fighter against a significantly less experienced fighter, then the significantly more experienced fighter will almost always win. So here at the JX Fight Club, I'm the coach. I have decades of experience. And so when people who've never fought before come in and they spar or roll with me, they think I'm a wizard. They're like, whoa, you're amazing. You're like a magician. You're blowing my mind with the things you can do. And then you have a professional fighter who has the same level of experience as I do, and it's like, it's nothing like that. Okay? So, man, there's a glare from the sun coming in here. Anyway, if it was that easy to calculate a score in mixed martial arts, I think that would be really cool. That would be really interesting. But so far, nobody's been able to do it. But I get what you're saying. If you can raise somebody up to, let's say, the entry-level professional level or an advanced amateur level in fighting, then yeah, against schmucks who don't know how to fight, they're going to dominate them most of the time. Self-defense is different, though, especially women's self-defense, because women who defend themselves, unless they're fighting other women who attack them often for some emotional reason, and which usually ends up in a hair-pulling contest, women usually face an uphill battle of fighting somebody who is significantly larger, stronger, or more of them, and often people with weapons. So, if you plan on solving your problems with fighting, with violence, then yeah, you need to be good at fighting. And if you are in one of those no-win scenarios where you're fighting somebody significantly stronger, multiple opponents, armed opponents, well, you'd best be as fit and capable as you possibly can, because you got to ramp that up way past the 1,100 mark if you want to win a no-win scenario. I hope that helps. Awesome question. Thanks for watching. Get out there and train.